Hello. Greg, welcome. Thank you for coming. I'm particularly happy to welcome you because you are one of the very few foreigners who have bet on China at many years ago. I mean, you came to China like 20 years ago, something like that, if I'm not mistaken?
In 1987, my first time.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was interesting time back then. China was just a few years into the Khmer and the beginning of the realization of the future having more in continuity with the past. History of China. China is a center of innovation. China is a center of economy. That stir was in the air in the mid-'80s, and I was very excited to have the chance to come to China and catch a feel of that eastern wind, the very warm and pleasant wind.
So as I was preparing this interview, as I was reading actually your biography, I noticed that you studying oceanography at college. So I was wondering, how do you end up being the vice president of Blackberry in China with a very challenging mission, which consists basically, to my understanding, to turn Blackberry into a major Chinese brand also? How do you come from oceanography to basically heading one of the most important company in the mobile space in China?
Well, that's an interesting question. From studying oceanography and marine geology, which I had been doing in Canada, where I'm from, I had a couple of classmates who were from mainland China at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, which had one of the top programs in this specific area of how mineral deposits are formed on the ocean floor. Live volcanoes on the ocean floor was the latest, greatest discovery. And we had always studied mineral deposits as fossils, you know, hundreds of millions of years old, and now they had submarines that could go down and find them. So it was interesting because there was a group of 6 students selected from Europe, US, Canada. I was the one Canadian. And 1/3 of that class were from Yejinbu. Fascinating. The mining and metallurgy ministry. I was very impressed. And also they happened to be the best at the calculus and the computer modeling, and their work ethic was unbelievable, and they're really wonderful friends. They became very good friends of mine. And I was intrigued about China because I'd spent a lot of time with them. So it turned out that the Yejinbu was asking them and a couple of their other scientists overseas to find a young so-called foreign expert, and I was invited in that way to come to China. And this is something that was the farthest from my imagination that I could think. I was fascinated with China. These 2 gentlemen were so different than the Chinese I knew growing up in Toronto, who were, mostly immigrated from Hong Kong or Guangdong. Some of them many generations before. They're very different and both very interesting, but quite different. I thought, wow, this is something deep inside of me. It's almost like a voice from God said the 3 words, go for it. It was like a voice, literally. And I said, go for it. And I said, what an incredible thing. Here I was, a young Turk, so to speak, just finished my master's degree, and I had an itchy foot. I was thinking of actually going to Eastern Europe, Soviet Union at the time, which was going through big social change, to study and do some more work. And just the Chinese invitation, it said, just go for it. So I ended up going and arriving in Beijing, and I was supposed to go to Beidaihe, for this branch of the Yejinbu where the leaders had a villa. And it wasn't finished yet, so the handler told me, we're not going to there, we're going to Shenyang. His English was not so great, and my Chinese was much worse than his English. He said, we're going to Shenyang. I said, oh, Shanghai, that'll be great. So I'm expecting to go to Shanghai. Of course, we all know about Shanghai in the West. I get off the plane, and it was 87年的 Shenyang. 天气啊 污染那么厉害. It was a really tough environment, but it was fabulous, the people. Just fabulous. Again, nothing like I could have expected. And so I was hooked at that point. It also helped that I met my future wife in Shenyang, so I have a sweet spot in my heart for Shenyang and for China because of that.
So yeah, you were very lucky because basically you got a vision coming from maybe from God, this famous "go for it," and at the very same time, you found the love of your life here. So that was definitely a good start with China.
How to get to BlackBerry is a different story, though, because that just got me to China. That was the most important move.
And so, what about BlackBerry?
Well, it's obvious. I mean, if you want to have a future in the most fascinating combination of two forces on the earth today, that's the re-emergence of the Chinese civilization of innovation with the origin of mobile cloud computing, which is the new paradigm, which I humbly submit has been primarily led by Mike Lazaridis, our founder, and Jim Balsley, our co-CEO. So I was fascinated to meet this company. Many years later, I went back to China as a diplomat. I got interested in science and technology as a diplomat. I then went into Hewlett-Packard and then Sun and other things, and got more and more involved in what was the most interesting trend, which was the convergence, 融合, of these major trends, computing and mobility. And so I was involved in starting groups working on that, the China Mobile Acceleration Partnership, the Mobile Commerce Group of the E-Commerce Forum, all that stuff. Some people here have been here over those years. Very fascinated. Basically, I would like to have the group because I needed to learn. I wasn't a double E background, right? I was a science background, but I knew that this was the bomb. This was it. And the bomb was, the greatest thing, the fabulous thing, was here in China. So those two things coming together got me more and more engaged in the industry, doing different things, and meeting different people. And when I was at US IT office, we had all those, I think the Holy Trinity, they were mentioned by Kai-Fu, who had worked for all three of those American companies. And there was this fascinating Canadian company, and I happened to come from Canada, but I had been working for American companies many years. This Canadian company that was doing real convergence. I mean, from the basics of the physics and the quantum computing and of how to carry data load, how to use limited spectrum from the quantum computing aspect through, how to think about energy efficiency, how to think about security from the very beginning of the whiteboarding. And that company was started just like the companies that Kai-Fu is working with, a kid, a dreamer in high school who didn't quite finish college because he just had to put a computer and a mobile device together. So I thought this company was very interesting. So that's how I ended up coming back to Canada, in a sense.
It was mobile computing before basically the word was even created.
Yes, so you could even say mobile cloud.
Yeah, you're right, exactly.
Okay, because if you understand what BlackBerry is, and we don't have yet a very big knowledge, we have an awareness. Some politicians that are well known from a country south of Canada love to use their BlackBerries. Okay, so a lot of people are aware of BlackBerry in China. Hey, 美啊，这是一个手机啊，是一个smartphone. But it's actually a solution for a very profound problem. And that problem is too many cars, too many packages on too narrow a road. How do you make it much more efficient to deliver reliably and securely critical communications and data? It sounds boring, but boy, it's important, right? So the existing paradigm of mobile on the internet, without going into detail, because I'm not a double E, okay, wasn't cutting it. You couldn't go beyond voice and basic SMS without there being a traffic jam and a problem. So the engineering in the network and in the enterprise software that constitutes the BlackBerry solution is the core of the success of BlackBerry. It happens to need a terminal, okay, and the terminals are pretty cool. I think. There's a lot of cool terminals out there. But the difference is, the engineering is, how do you solve this problem? How do you move from the Pony Express to FedEx, UPS, Sinotrans? From small amounts of packages, many of which go missing, physical packages, which are not very secure, can be hijacked by thieves on the road, right? To extremely secure delivery, tracking of packages. Think about that for UPS or Sinotrans. Think about the same thing for moving data packages, okay, through the cloud. The cloud is like the Wild West, right? You're out there, you want all the stuff that happens in your hand. All the stuff that happens in your desktop with a fixed line or your laptop. with limited mobility, we now demand, especially China, demands that in their hand. But they want the same security, they want the same applications, the same productivity, the same everything. How do you do that over wireless spectrum, which is so limited, and energy life, which is so limited, and throughput, which is so limited? You have to have a total solution, right? So that's where we've come from. That's why BlackBerry. Why China? China, because back to oceanography, is a vast ocean of opportunity, okay? With very complex currents and streams and levels of movement of water and flowing. On the surface, it looks pretty smooth, but underneath, it's a very vibrant and volatile environment. So the oceanography was very, very helpful for me to understand how to survive and build a business in China.
Why is BlackBerry investing so heavily in China today?
Well, I think you'd have to be, how shall I say, oxygen deprived or something, not to realize that there's been, back to oceanography and plate tectonics, because we were studying that, a very fundamental shift. It has taken place, I would argue, 5 to 6 years ago. The awareness of that vibration is coming on to people now much more clearly, because there are many more announcements and many more movements of capital.
I think, sorry to interrupt you, but I think my question is that you seem to be a very late comer in this market, basically.
Okay. Oh, so BlackBerry.
All the main players seem to be already well established. So why does BlackBerry think that it can still make it by coming at this late stage and investing so much now? Because even investing so much, maybe it's too late.
I would disagree with that if you understand once again what BlackBerry really is. BlackBerry is mobile cloud computing. It is not simply a terminal. If it was simply a terminal company, a high-end terminal company, there might be some room in your argument, okay? But it is a system which needs certain enabling conditions to be in place. And the development and the sophistication of the networks in China and the release of 3G licenses is now cresting. So, and also of a developer community, and that energy and talent that Kai-Fu and others are working on to build is very profoundly necessary to enable and enliven a BlackBerry experience. So I like to think of it more as JIT, just in time, right? We're here and we see all those conditions are coming together well. And you may have heard some news. We are making commitments in a number of ways here in the China market, which I think will help take China from a fast follower position to a leading position in the mobile cloud.
So if I understand well, it's just in time because the regulatory aspect of the license are in place, because also you have a whole community of developers for applications which is starting to connect. So my understanding is that what you mean is that the ecosystem of China Tech innovation seems to be in place to favor the installation of BlackBerry now here.
That's correct.
So my question for you now is there any threat you can see in the China Tech innovation ecosystem as a whole that could jeopardize somehow the progress of BlackBerry in China?
Yeah, I think, the classic SWOT analysis, right? Strength, weakness, opportunity, threat. I think your question is China Inc., or China as a player in mobile cloud and technology and innovation. Are there threats to that succeeding? Is that the question? Or?
Yes, I mean, right now there's an ecosystem in tech innovation which is taking place in China and which you said is basically favoring the installation of BlackBerry here. You mentioned that it's just in time. Mm-hmm. Don't you think that there are also some threats in this burgeoning environment which is under progress and under creation?
Yeah, I would think that China is at a very pivotal moment historically, okay? Especially in the last 2 years of the financial crisis, we've seen that the Chinese economy has continued, in fact, has powered some of the stabilization in the global economy. And I think Chinese people have every reason to feel proud of that achievement, of the energy that's in this economy, the pent-up desire, which translates into productivity and hard work and economic activity. That's all really good. The one caution I would have, which I really got to thinking about when I was at US IT office and we were talking about innovation, a lot of discussion about innovation, was there can be, in a movement from a position of a follower to a position of a leader, a danger in starting to adopt what we call a swagger. Okay? That's like, I think Kai-Fu mentioned, you have a young entrepreneur who knows something but doesn't realize he doesn't know everything. So that's the only, it's a minor comment. I would say true innovation to happen 是创新协会在中国。如果你喜欢建立这样的社会, this kind of innovation society, there needs to be a disciplined approach, not to be too much of a follower like 10, 15 years ago, because you have your own culture, you have your own ideas. You need to bring those forward. But on the other hand, not to fall in the other direction saying, we're fine on our own. 自主创新, I understand the principle of moving from farming to manufacturing to service society, and you need to really discipline yourself to do that. But some of the aspects of that philosophy can be a bit limiting for others to participate. And once you limit the access to an innovation zone, let's say China as an innovation zone, Zhongguancun or some of the other tech parks, and once you have policies or procedures that effectively restrict the mingling and connecting of financial, technical, and human capital, then you may be onto a difficult situation. I know there's a lot of movement back and fro in the policy arena in China, and there are many who believe in 开放创新, open innovation, as I do. And there's others who are concerned that maybe they should be looking more at self-reliant or, maybe even aspects of what might be called protectionism.
Well, actually,
that's the only aspect I would
there's a plan in the 5-year plan of the Communist Party, if I'm not mistaken. There's one statement about indigenous standards, right?
Yeah, and so it's a very complicated area. And there's a lot of reasons for what are being done, what different ministries and agencies are doing to help evolve an innovation society. And they're borrowing a lot of practices from the Western world as well. Because a lot of these things that I'm basically questioning are not at all just China. They're actually benchmarked from other economies, Western economies. Doesn't mean to say that in my view they're necessarily helpful. What is helpful is when you build the most welcoming environment for people from all over to come together, for money from all over to come together, and for technology to converge from different disciplines. Because innovation happens at the intersection of those things. It happens when West meets East, when young meets old, when one engineering biophysics meets chemistry. You see? So when you can actually focus on that innovation zone, the environment that brings things together, and then, try to protect people's IPR and that kind of thing, there's a lot of progress on that in China, that's absolutely going to underpin the achievement of, in a very large scale, of a very robust innovation society in China.
Okay, so I think we understood pretty well so far where you're coming from. We understood also pretty well the market opportunity for BlackBerry, and I'm glad to see that it's not too late. You're just in time, as you were saying. We understood also that you are facing some challenges, as you were mentioning, in particular of potential development of indigenous standards and regulatory issues. Now, I understand the market opportunity, but I'm not sure I really understand how you're going to make it here in China. What I mean make it is, how are you going to turn BlackBerry, which is a major brand worldwide, into a major brand on the most important market in the world?
Well, I mean, that's a very good question. I have to be careful because some of this could be, to give you a very detailed answer, would be disclosing some special
helping
sauce,
your competitors.
Right? But I think I can talk in general terms, and it can still hopefully be a substantive comment. The secret in China, I think, some of the other comments have underlined this as well, is not to think fundamentally of China as a market into which you sell things. It is a market in which you develop the next generation of thinking and activity. So therefore, you must harness the energy and enthusiasm and imagination of business people and technology people in China. And it has to be done on the grassroots level. So therefore, the developers in the developer communities, the business people who are partners in channels, who are putting together business models, your friends in the carriers and so forth, to really listen like a good doctor to what is the challenge in this society. How do people use the technology to get things done here, which may be a little bit different than what you do. And therefore, you have to make a morphing or adjusting of your business implementation, the way you do things. So that's very important. So you have to be flexible and you have to rethink, you might even say reinvent. So we talk about that in RIM a lot, reinvent RIM, right? So you get constantly being innovative by responding to the energy of this new area and new environment. First point. Second point, yeah.
Your competitors are not going to be a source of inspiration for you here.
I think competition is always a source of inspiration. And we've been in a most extremely competitive environment, you know, I think until recently. I think it may now be China, but it has been the US market, where we've built a very strong leadership position in mobile cloud and in smartphone work. And that is a market where there's some very, very strong turnover from previous champions to new champions as well. Nothing. I think we will leverage our own technology, but grow it, morph it, adjust it, improve it through engaging the capital, people, and technology that are focused on this marketplace. And to the extent that we achieve that, we will continue to flourish as a company, and hopefully we will make a very substantial contribution to China becoming a leading center in mobile cloud computing and in mobile data. Not a follower, but actual leader. I'm quite confident that that will happen. And I'm very excited about the opportunity for BlackBerry to be part of that.
Okay. When I interrupted you, you were about to mention a second point. So I don't know if it was included.
That was the second point, is investment of technology and capital and people.
Okay. All right. I understood that there was some big breaking news coming up this morning at 6:30, if I'm not mistaken. Something really, 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 really big, right?
I think you're right, yes.
Yeah, because I see some champagne, right, on the table, like morning champagne at 10 a.m.
Very good. Well, I think people may have known, if they're watching the tech news, that there was an announcement as a sign of you saying, how do you make sure that you are, back to your question, how do you make sure you're going to be committed? Well, it does involve technology, people, and capital. And so I'm very delighted to be able to share with you here and your audience and TechCrunch and Tencent and the other media.
Information Week.
That we have just announced a fund dedicated for China with the BlackBerry Partners Fund and with the leading mobile cloud-focused group in China, China Broadband Capital. So I'm very delighted to announce that to you today here at China ICT.
Oh, that's great, because beyond the Western audience, which is following China ICT live right now, we have also many people following us across China through Sina and through Tencent. So I think it's going to be going.
We're very excited. Okay, so this is a substantial fund with some substantial partners. It brings together the BlackBerry Partners Fund based in Canada, with its track record of investments mostly in the Western world, with again the leading group here in China, China Broadband Capital, and we're really excited because we're going to really invest in China-based organizations, a couple dozen at least, with this fund, which is $100 million US. And it's going to be deployed in China for China-focused opportunities in the mobile space, precisely mobile internet, mobile cloud, to really bring that to another level and to realize the leadership of China as a leading marketplace for innovation in this space.
That's definitely a great strategy to make it here.
Great.
Okay, fantastic. So
could we celebrate with your friends? Because I noticed I have a friend here in the audience who is a representative of a certain company called China Broadband Capital, Mr. Tian Suning, Edward Tian.
All right.
Please come on up.
Okay, great.